morning. How's it going, fellas? I got a lone comment on my very low-viewed last video I did about Star Trek and the possibilities of Paramount's new ownership doing anything good with it. But it was a fairly interesting comment in terms of a content request. So from K9Ein999, I'd like to see you make a video series about if anything like Star Trek could eventually work in real life and what would need to happen for that to be possible. Well, I don't know if I really can make a whole series out of that. I don't have a ton to say. But there are some points to be made about whether or not, in general, the Star Trek future is possible to be achieved. I mean, the short answer is no, obviously. So, until next time,
stay crampinated.
But no, that's probably not what our commenter actually meant or wanted, and there's more to unpack there. So let's see. What are we talking about, even when we're saying is the Star Trek future possible? Technologically or socially? The answer to both of those is probably no, but to different degrees of probability. The easier one to address is technology. Star Trek's technology can really be parsed down to two things that makes it distinct from what we have right now, and that are the barriers to overcome that might not be able to be overcomeable. And that is the concept of warp drive for faster than light travel, and the intersection of how teleporter technology is also used for the replication of matter, which allows Star Trek's future to have the semblance of post-scarcity. Both of them have a huge issue with power. It's all well and good to say, like, oh, we make a device that can, the Alcubierre warp drive idea that came out in the 90s, that, we can warp the space around a ship so that it's pinched in front and wider in the back of the ship, which will cause it to scoot across space faster than light can travel across space, because you're not really traveling through space. It's almost like a kind of a hybrid between the older version of Star Trek's warp drive, which is more of a time warp.
It's just a jump to the left.
Subspace warp, and fold space from books like Dune. You're not folding the entire universe down to travel instantly from one point to another like it's Event Horizon or some shit. But you are pinching it and kind of zipping along. Beyond the fact of what on earth kind of device is actually going to be capable of doing that can just grab raw, empty space and compress it, the power output needed for such a thing, which we're talking hypothetically like on the magnitude of harnessing the entire energy output of one or more entire star systems. That's not going to happen anytime soon. If we get to a point where we have that kind of free and easy power output, the need for faster than light travel is going to be somewhat moot.
With your hands on your hips.
Other than to just scratch curiosity's sake. Any attempt to achieve that sort of power output level is potentially horrifically destructive. Transporters and replicators are technically the same thing. Replicated matter in Star Trek is not a 3D printer situation where they're just recycling material from one thing and turning it into another. It's direct energy to matter conversion, which is so basically what a replicator is doing is it's taking a pattern from a transporter buffer of a steak or a t-shirt or whatever, and is taking energy and forcing it into that configuration on an atomic level. This is also an order of magnitude, not just of power consumption, but of complexity, that it's hard to see that we're going to be able to get to anything like that anytime soon. Once again, there's also the question of exactly what is the mechanism that can even do that. Teleportation, on top of that, you have the whole issue of, is the teleportation killing the person being teleported because they're being vaporized at one end and being replicated at the other end? The thing on the other end might think it's you, but can you actually guarantee that the continuity of personal perception leapfrogs from one to the other? Perhaps you can try to Deepak Chopra your way through it with quantum entanglement and a bunch of other scientific buzzwords, but I will always be skeptical of that. So I guess you can count me in Dr. McCoy's camp when it comes to trust of transporters. Holodecks, to a certain degree, also are tied in with replicator transporter technology. Hence why there are some things in a holodeck that you can't leave the holodeck with as long as it's non-living matter. A artificial life form in the hollow matrix cannot sustain itself because replicators can't make living material. They can make dead matter, but not living cells. But if you're in the holodeck and it makes you a steak and you eat the steak, it's not a holographic steak. It's a replicated steak created by the hollow matrix. It's all fanciful in the extreme, and since replicator technology in specific is the basis upon which Star Trek's Federation's post-scarcity economy is able to sustain itself, that's... If you remove that technology, then a bunch of other aspects of how Star Trek operates would have to be adjusted in terms of the economics of how people survive and feed themselves. But once again, we are dealing with a society that's able to generate insane amounts of electricity. There's also the fact that, even all our different types of electricity generation that aren't hydraulic in nature are all based on steam power. You might be using different types of heat sources to generate the steam power that runs the turbines, that spins the coils around a magnet that generates the electric charge that can then be transmitted down lines. But whether or not you're using a boiler with wood in it, or you're using coal, or you're using nuclear power, that they're all actually really just steam technology. And there's very little in Star Trek to indicate that, they're running any sort of steam-driven turbines on these ships. So they have come up with some way to direct transfer energy from their antimatter core directly into the power systems of the starship in order to be able to run anything without having to use a turbine system and coolant and having to constantly top off their water tanks and all that kind of stuff. The transporters, on top of the might be killing you thing, there's also a level of complexity of not only being able to completely recreate an entire person's atomic pattern perfectly and everything in line with no mistakes, but the targeting parameters of actually being able to teleport something to another place in a universe that is not just in constant motion, but is in multiple fields of motion. They're all running in different directions. You're on a starship in orbit over a planet, and you're going to teleport someone down to the surface. Well, not only do you have to pinpoint the point on the surface where you want your target to materialize, but that targeting frame has to be cued so that it follows the spinning motion of the planet and the forward motion arc of that planet orbiting its primary star system, and the movement of that star system, and the movement of the galaxy, and the movement of space itself as it slides through the nothingness. That's a lot of shit to compensate for, which also means more computing power and more electricity in order to be able to generate all these functions. Plus, without a receiving pad at the other end, it's like one thing to be beaming people from transporter pad A down to transporter pad B, but they're also beaming people down into places where there's no reception technology. So what are they even using to generate the material out of when they're reincorporating a transported object or person at the bottom? It's fanciful technology that was invented largely just because in the original series of Star Trek, their shuttle pod models were running a bit behind and being delivered. And so they had to come up with some way for the crew to get down to the planet for the mission of the episode to be able to be fulfilled. And so they just invented transporters for that convenience. And from that, other things have then been retroactively spun off of that kind of technology. Like I said, you can't get replicators without transporters. And to a certain degree, holodecks also are dependent upon transporter and replicator technology. And without replicators, you don't get the post-scarcity. And without warp drive, you don't get the interstellar exploration and the ability to create little leagues of interplanetary alliances between various alien races that all look like humans but with broken noses, and all that other stuff that Star Trek would aesthetically need if you're looking for the Star Trek future in that form. The more complicated question is whether or not the social aspects of the Star Trek future are attainable. And the answer is a general no, probably not. However, it's not as impossible as creating the energy systems and technologies required to make a warp drive or a transporter system. Getting humanity to a point where we have finally collectively let go of all of our historical baggage.
There's nothing to worry about. How'd you do, man? You've met, man. Faithful, hand in hand.
Is technically possible, but the likelihood is very low. We are a very grudge-holding species, and if you kind of look deeper into the Star Trek setting as it evolved, especially during the 90s, that arguably didn't even happen according to their own internal canon. World War III occurred in the mid-21st century. Something about that war was bad enough that it shocked the surviving population into realizing that, oh shit, we need to drop all this racism shit now, because this isn't going to take us anywhere. But if you go further down and look into some of the stuff around the origins of the Maquis and other things, particularly out of Deep Space Nine, there is still some lingering trace of historical baggage around African Americans, as portrayed by Sisko and his family. Very mild, obviously, compared to where we are now, but there's still a trace of it. And also the fact that like a large segment of the Native American population of the future has just decided to say fuck it and leave the planet entirely, which is kind of a weird choice. But Star Trek has always had this fascination with putting Indians in space. You might be able to pull it off for a generation or two, but eventually someone's gonna look back on history and see things that have been done by or to people who share their particular lineage characteristics, and they will see themselves in that, sympathize with that, empathize with that, and end up resurrecting the historical cycles that perpetuate and keep us from ever being able to fully break out of any of this shit. I will say there was something said in the pilot episode of TNG, Encounter of Farpoint, during the mock trials that Q was putting on that were supposed to be a replication of the post-atomic horror right after the World War of the mid-21st century.
I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania.
Or something Picard said had like the second round of Geneva Conventions, one of the things declared is that no race can be held accountable for the historical actions of that race, which kind of implies that there was something about World War III that had to do with white people. Because that seems the sort of legal framework one would come up specifically to address the grievances a lot of people have against the historical actions of Europeans. But what specifically any of that was, no one knows, because they all kept it intentionally vague. The danger of trying to rely on a mass destruction World War scenario to wake humanity up is not really worth the risk. Anything strong enough to create that sort of psychological shock that could actually like change everyone's mind on this one thing and get them to hold to that for centuries to come afterwards would have to be so deadly as to be too high of a risk of killing everyone by accident. You know, you can't guarantee that you only will take out 60% of the population with your nuclear war. Anything strong enough to kill 60% of the population is also strong enough to kill 100% of the population. And that's not really worth it, is it? Best we can hope for is like a slow, controlled population collapse into something more manageable so that there's less direct competition and people have more space for them to be able to be themselves, and for a better universalized curriculum of world history that everyone gets. So it kind of brings everyone on the same page, which is also very impractical because there's always going to be resistance to universalized anything, especially planet-wide. It's hard to even universalize stuff within a singular country, within a singular people group, let alone across multiple races, multiple nations, across the entire planet. The way, as I like to put it, you'll never have a completely united Earth government because places like Afghanistan are never going to be on board with that shit. And as long as you have some areas of the planet that are saying, fuck you, we're not playing along, that's going to undermine the entire project. Did the Native Americans in Star Trek's future voluntarily leave Earth, or were they subtly encouraged to do so, much like the English Puritans were subtly encouraged to get the fuck out of England and go to Denmark and Amsterdam and then eventually back over the sea to come to the Americas? Kind of a thing. When I was younger, I would have thought such a future, especially the social aspects of it, was probably more attainable than I think now as time goes on. It's just, as I say, people are so prone to holding on to grudges, especially grudges that aren't even their own grudges, but grudges of people they choose to identify with. That, I don't know, forcible breeding programs that merge all the races together into one and erase all semblance of ethnic identity, I guess could kind of get us there, but also somewhat defeats the purpose of trying to achieve just a racial harmony where everyone's just able to like appreciate each other and not feel like they have to be ashamed of what they are or hate on somebody else for being different, that everyone can kind of just view each other as like, oh, that's cool. Kind of an attitude towards other ethnicities and other cultures. The aspects of Star Trek that might be a bit more realistic socially is achieving like the post-feminist kind of society that Star Trek kind of has. Or, well, at least at a time, it seemed like, you know, that the gay acceptance,
I'm just a sweet transvestite,
as displayed in shows like Discovery, was attainable. Although, once again, humans are fickle, easily manipulatable, and it doesn't help that there's a tangled mass of corporate and political actors who have incentive to constantly manipulate populations to hold on to these grudges and enmities so that they can gain and exploit based upon the maintenance of these hatreds. Any universal government that has to be enforced planet-wide will not be valid. Might as well just be as bad as any fascist regime or imperial model that wants to conquer everything. So, yeah, unfortunately, no, I don't think the Star Trek future, technologically or socially, is really attainable. We might be able to get close to it in a few ways, and just because we can never fully get there doesn't mean it's not a good goal to still strive towards, because since people are so afraid of a slow population collapse, well, then we still have to figure out ways for us to all be able to cohabitate on this planet in such large numbers with no breathing room in between anybody. Otherwise, we will end up with that World War III scenario, and it will probably not shock people into dropping all the racism and sexism and sexualityism.
Transsexual, Transylvania.
And all that other stuff afterwards, because in the immediate aftermath of that war, the survivors will hold grudges against the people who inflicted the damage upon them, because that's how humans think. They might be in shock for a little while, but eventually someone will come along and tell all the Germans that it's not their fault that their lives have become shit. It's actually everyone else's fault that they went to war and fucked themselves up. Kind of a thing. History is not a cycle in a literal sense that it's a wheel that keeps literally repeating all the points along the wheel, but there are predictable back and forth swings of counter reactions because humans react to stimuli in predictable manners. And those reactions create new stimuli that have reactions that create new stimuli that have reactions that create new stimuli. And from that, you get the semblance of the wheel of history, even if it's not technically a wheel in some sort of mystical sense. And there are ways to disrupt that chain if you understand how to control the stimuli that people are reacting to.
Truly beautiful to behold. And somebody should be told, my libido hasn't been in control.
But planetary management in our current day and age is obviously not trustworthy for any of those sorts of endeavors. They're mostly interested in just trying to basically rip people off as much as possible so they can all die rich. And obviously, that's not how we're going to get to the Star Trek future anyway.
What's come over me? Whoa, here it comes again.
Socially, I've become pessimistic about humanity's ability to reach these sorts of social harmonics. And technologically, interstellar travel is too expensive in terms of power requirements, plus the actual physical machinery to do these things that would warp space. Like just generating a strong magnetic field isn't going to do that. It's kind of the same problem with like wormhole technology. Like, even if mathematically you can work out that wormholes should exist, what exactly are you going to build that's going to grab one and pry open its end? And what's going to happen to any matter sent down through it? There's reasons why these are devices in science fiction, because a problem with interstellar set science fiction is that Star Trek's not going to be the same kind of show if they're actually traveling at sublight speeds and it takes hundreds of thousands of years to get between star systems. Like, humans don't know how to really tell generational tales on that sort of scale. At least not that, are dynamic and interesting in the way that people want their stories to be told. They want the triumphs of individual people and the journeys of individual people. We can't have all of our science fiction be about 5,000 year long social arcs of lineages trying to get to Alpha Centauri on board their slowly dying and rusting spaceship and all that. And so they invent technology that is based loosely on hyper-theoretical physics ideas, but there's no actual practical way to achieve that. You don't have a device that can grab onto empty space in front of you and crush it so that you zip towards it faster, able to exceed the normal Planck limits of how fast cause and effect can be transmitted across space. I mean, that's the actual real barrier. It's not that you can't travel faster than light. It's that light can't travel faster than cause and effect. Nothing can travel faster than cause and effect. You can't crush space to get around that. There's no device that will do that. Even the things that exist in nature that do crush space, like heavy gravitational objects like neutron stars and black stars, don't then themselves start zipping around the universe faster than light because of the way they've warped the space around them. They still are limited by cause and effect, which is what the Planck scale is.
It's just a jump to the left.
It is the minimal length of data transmission across any given region of space. And the fact that you'd have to be able to generate more energy than entire stars. Like, God, you know what kind of transcendent fucking pseudo-technological beings we would be by the point that we could do such things? I mean, like I said, we wouldn't even have any intellectual need or desire to even want to travel between the star systems. Were we able to harness such sort of energies? And assuming that we don't absolutely fucking destroy ourselves and wipe out our entire solar system in the process of just even trying to achieve such power levels. Also, what exactly you're doing to anything that's physically in front of your ship while you're compressing the space in front of it to do this sort of stuff? You know, sounds like a great way to accidentally destroy whole star systems and planets. But it's still a nice thing to dream about. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone could get along and not hate each other? And we actually had a frontier again, somewhere to explore, now that we've mapped the entire surface of the one planet we actually can survive and get around on. At least all the usable bits. Personally, I don't think we should even be bothering trying to go settle Mars or any other planet in our solar system until we've actually started to do the hard work of settling people on the bottom of the ocean and habitats, or settling people in Antarctica in habitats. If we can't handle setting up a self-sustained habitat-based colony in Antarctica, we have no business trying to have people live on the moon or on Mars or on Titan or on anywhere else in our solar system, let alone trying to send people on generational ships across the Gulf to try to get to Proxima Centauri b or some other long shot that you're not just going to get to the other side and find that you've sent a bunch of people to go die on a lifeless rock with a toxic atmosphere. Or that even if you do find a planet that seems to have life, it's not going to be chemically compatible, even remotely, and this like being in it would be toxic. We are not creatures that live on the surface of the earth. We are part of the surface of the earth. And leaving that is the most unnatural thing you could possibly have us do. And we're going to have all sorts of unforeseen consequences. There's some degree that our evolution, our ability to even have formed the basic lipid fats that contain the little bubbles that are our cells, and that our ability to have formed DNA coils and all the other basic elemental things that just allowed single-celled life to evolve in the first place, is greatly dependent upon the planet's gravity, its spins, and all sorts of other little factors that you only would get exactly on this one planet. And that going to Mars, yeah, you might live for a little while, but after several generations, like, cellular life might start breaking down as we know it. You know, we do not know what we're condemning future descendants to suffer from, to try to send people out there. All because of some existential idea that, like, oh, well, Earth's going to die in 4 billion years. Well, we're all going to be fucking dead by then anyway, so who gives a fuck if Earth's not going to live another 4 billion years? We need to be worried more about what Earth's going to be like in the next 100 years, when you're still conceivably going to be around, or at least your direct descendants are going to still be around. And until we can figure that kind of shit out, maybe we should be worrying less about the 25th century. So I guess those are my thoughts on whether or not the Star Trek future is actually attainable. Check links in the description box below to support the channel by buying yourself a book this holiday season. And until next time, once again,
stay crampinated. Yeah.
I'm just a sweet transvestite.